welcome to On the House, the podcast where we talk about movies, TV shows, and video games because, hey, whatever we want to talk about is on the house. Joining me, as always, is Dave.
That's my acapella Halloween theme.
And I'm Clancy, and yes, as you probably guessed, we are taking a look at the latest sequel in the Halloween series with the most confusing timeline ever, Halloween Kills.
We're doing the Simpsons style and releasing our Halloween special in November.
Yes, because we're smart. For those who aren't familiar with the premise of Halloween, it's about, or this current Halloween, it takes place basically immediately after the last Halloween, which was also titled Halloween, because it loves confusing people. And it's furthermore of what happens on that night is the briefest of descriptions for this movie.
I mean, the pandemic-related delays gave this like the neat distinction of being on the 40th anniversary of Halloween 2.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it came 3 years later instead of the 2 as it was intended, and because both those movies takes place on the same night as the previous installment.
And everything comes full circle. But yeah, essentially, to bring you up to speed, if you hadn't seen the previous Halloween, which is a sequel to the original Halloween, everyone get that? Too bad, we're moving on anyways. Essentially, Michael Myers escapes from the mental hospital that he had been locked in for the previous 40-odd years. And through various circumstances I won't get into in case you haven't seen the last Halloween, he faces off against Laurie Strode again. And when we last saw him, he was trapped in her basement with her house on fire. Unfortunately, if you know anything about Michael Myers, you know that's kind of like throwing a piece of paper at a bulldozer. That's not going to stop him. So here we are once again. Dave, why don't you let us know what your thoughts were just heading into this?
Well, I should be open about the fact that I kind of had, for a long time now, the synopsis of the plot known because I found some sources online, and I know you can easily fake those. You can say, oh, you went to a test screening, but then like the early teasers they put out last year, I realized that matches up with a lot of the things I read. So I basically knew everything going in over a year, but I was really looking forward to it. The last one ended up being the biggest slasher film ever financially, and when they announced 2 sequels, I liked that they were going to continue the story and come up with a new backstory explanation for everything. And I will say the previous one, the 2018 movie, it's a lot more solid and slightly stronger, but I would say Halloween Kills had a lot more interesting ideas, even if I don't think they were fully realized.
Gotcha. For me, it's I thought the last Halloween film was like a great return to form for the series. And this one I kind of feel like was another Halloween film. Which isn't to say it's bad, but the previous Halloween, what year did that come out with?
2018.
All right, Halloween 2018. I'm going to call it that to distinguish it from the classic Halloween.
That's what everybody does.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember what year it was. But anyways, Halloween 2018 was the kind of slasher that I think people who don't generally like slashers would like. This is very much a film where you'll like it if you're a Halloween fan, but I don't think it's going to have the wide appeal that the classic Halloween or Halloween 2018 has, if that makes sense.
And tying back into something I said all the way back in our Curtains episode, I could appreciate 2018 and Kills for trying to be about something. Like, generational trauma, whether it be for an individual like Laurie's case or the community of Haddonfield and Kills.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give him credits for trying to do it. I personally think it didn't quite work. If I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, I think this is a entertaining movie. But not necessarily a great movie, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But to get a little more into the plot, like we said, this Michael escapes the impossible situation that he was in at the last movie. And he's basically just, as the trailers show, going on a killing spree to get to his old house. And at some point, the people of the town decide to kind of form an angry mob and stop him. And that's pretty much it for the plot, if we're being honest with you.
I mean, when they announced 2 sequels back to back in 2019, I figured the first of the 2 installments was always probably going to feel the lighter on story.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this definitely. I think my opinion on how I really feel about this film is really going to be shaped by if they nail the landing on the third film or not.
I mean, the movie I would compare this to the most is some of the later Saw sequels, not because of the gore or anything, but that was like at the height of the franchise's popularity where you knew there were multiple sequels already announced. So you knew going into a movie there was no way it could be the climax of the story.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. I'd say for me, there's two types of films that kind of do this where there's planned sequels equals already greenlit and everything. There's the Lord of the Ring approach where, yes, this is part of a bigger story, but it feels like its own fully formed movie. And then there's the Hobbit approach of this definitely feels like part of a story.
Well, my original theory was that the entire new trilogy was going to take place on the same night, and that turned out to actually have been the original intention. But when they got the year-long shooting delay because of the pandemic, they reworked the script to end, so it'll take place 4 years later.
Probably a good call with how the actors are going to be aging just with the delays they've had.
Yeah, and people like to say about the original Halloween 2 that that's a movie so clearly made years later that they're trying to pass off as the same night.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But let's be honest, the main reason people watch these movies are for the kills. And I will say there are some great kills in this movie.
It's in the title this time around. Why wouldn't it be?
Exactly. But no, there's definitely some great moments in this movie, is what I would say. But overall, I just keep going back to the feeling of how I'm ultimately going to feel about this is how they end up nailing or failing the landing, because I don't think it's a spoiler to say something doesn't happen in a movie. So I'm just going to say the trailers are showing this being a big final matchup between Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Myers. And that does not happen in this movie.
Yeah, she may be counted as the final girl, but she and Michael never even look at each other in the movie.
In fact, in terms of the general plot, this would be, if this was a TV show, it wouldn't be the guest. This would be, and featuring special guests, Jamie Lee Curtis.
My favorite Twitter tweet I saw about this feels like the 22 short films about Springfield episode of The Simpsons, but just if they all died at the end of each segment.
Yeah, I will say that is one thing that I kind of was wondering if they realized, oh shoot, because of all the retcons we've had in universe, Michael Myers does not really have a high body count. They make up for it in this movie.
And then one of the key features of this one was that whereas the 2018 film mainly brought back Laurie, this film brought back a lot of other legacy characters. Tommy, Lindsay, Marion, and even Lonnie the Bully, who hasn't been in anything since the original 78 movie.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that the filmmakers love this series.
So, oh, yeah. And Sheriff Brackett, I didn't even realize this actor was still alive for the longest time.
Yeah, me either.
But I will say, like, and this is the weirdest thing that I've put so much thought into is, like, I mean, I can understand their shared trauma of having, like, survived Michael Myers, but where did Marion meet Tommy and Lindsay? She was, like, in her 20s, and they were just little kids at the original.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's certain things like that, or, for example, there's an ongoing plot element about how Michael Myers has been a dark plague over this town for decades. When in reality of the movie, he's been in jail for 40 years. You're not really, like, that's certainly traumatizing certain characters, but as a town, you're not going to feel like this maniac's been on the loose, like, say, the Zodiac Killer or something, you know?
Yeah. And
which I think we'll get into spoilers a little bit now, if you're okay with that, Dave.
Sure.
Because there's a very big plot about mob violence and how dangerous it can be and whatnot. And I applaud them for attempting it. I just don't think it quite worked.
I mean, I think it's better than when Halloween 2 or Halloween 4 tried it, because in 2, they just randomly kill off Ben Tramer, who is still alive in this continuity, by accident. And then in Halloween 4, the rednecks just accidentally shoot somebody they mistake for Myers. And neither of those films ever made a big deal of it. So I can appreciate they tried to handle the plot point with more dramatic flair this time around.
Yeah, they're trying. I just don't think it quite works. Like, for example, at one point they are chasing somebody who they mistakenly believe is Michael Myers, which just in universe, like, I know getting swept up in the mob and everything, but in universe they know what Michael Myers looks like without the mask. And this guy, like, body type and everything, he just does not match. So I just, stuff like that, I feel keeps it from having the impact it would have otherwise, you know?
Though I was actually sad to learn that apparently the actor who played the mental patient mistaken for Michael actually passed away earlier this year.
That is too bad.
Yeah. And also, like, the one issue I had with my criticism of the angry mob plot is that I can understand when you're doing it with, like, a Frankenstein type, because that's truly a misunderstood entity, but it doesn't really work as a criticism when the threat is a legit evil being.
Yeah, and it kind of also, it goes down like you shouldn't use mob justice or vigilante justice. But that was kind of the plot of the last movie, though, with Jamie Lee Curtis's character getting revenge on her demons, basically. So it's just stuff like that. it doesn't work as well as the movie thinks it does. Is
And
what I would ultimately say.
and sure, the mob, if they had actually succeeded in killing Michael Myers, I mean, sure, they would have still had legal trouble, but none of us in the audience would have been thinking they were morally in the wrong.
Mm-hmm. And it's like even afterwards, like there's a scene where the whole mob is attacking Michael Myers. And I'm not gonna lie, after seeing him kill like a grandma, it's like, yeah, beat the shit out of that guy.
So when we say there were a lot of kills in this movie, there were a lot, and it wasn't just nobodies. There were a lot of recognizable reoccurring characters who died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say there's a good 20 kills in this movie.
Yeah, and a lot of them come from big massacre scenes where none of the characters involved have names, but
Yeah, it's so in total there are 34 deaths. So which I'd say of the 34 deaths, about 10 of those are of characters that are either you care about or they do that thing where they introduce them just long enough for you to feel bad when they die.
at least characters who at least had a presence in the plot.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I really like is how even some of the earlier kills were actually very minor roles in the 2018 film, but just brought back. So I think this really does a better job at feeling like the same night. Like the elderly couple killed early on. The wife was the gravekeeper at the graveyard that the podcasters were talking to in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And like the nurse and doctor couple at the party, you saw them leaving during the like one take neighborhood massacre in the previous movie.
Yeah, for sure. Which I will say, the older couple, that's probably the one that's like, oh no, not them. They're so don't do that to them. But then, like Dave says, there's quite a few that are just fireman number 4.
And also there was and we lose a lot of the legacy characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like
For
Marion.
Sorry,
What?
go ahead.
You go on.
For example, the ending of the film definitely killed off one character I was not expecting to as its final moments.
Well, I was figuring they were probably going to kill off one of the three Strodes in this.
See, going in, I would agreed with you, but then when they killed off the Tommy Doyle character, I was like, okay, he probably took the place, and one of the Strodes is going to bite the bullet. Opening scene next movie.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they kill off Karen.
Yeah, the one good Karen.
There's no good Karens. I tease.
So there are so many kills. We should just talk about who's at least among the name cast is still alive. Like there's Laurie, obviously. Allison, the granddaughter, made it. Lindsay Wallace. So they didn't kill off everybody they brought back.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I'll give the trailers this, they managed to completely hide. One of the supposed kills of the last movie didn't die.
Yeah. Which definitely tells me next movie. Like I said, I think in the end, how I'm going to feel on this movie is going to come down to do they nail it with the next film or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of this does feel like set up for a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they brought back Hawkins. Like, I really liked him the previous one, and I kind of hated. Well, maybe not. That's a little too extreme. Just the circumstances of the way he went out. I'm being cryptic to avoid a spoiler for the last one, but like literally the very first scene, is like the cheating boyfriend who basically gets a redemption arc in this, like walking around, finding him like bleeding but still alive and managing to save him.
Yeah, they kind of give him a redemption arc, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I thought at first it was a CGI recreation, but when they did the 78 flashback, they just got really good, like, Donald Pleasance prosthetic makeup for another actor.
Wait, that wasn't CGI de-aging?
No, that was just, like, they got an actor who looked pretty close and then prosthetics to make it almost identical.
Oh, that's impressive. I thought it was just the CGI de-aging, and that's why it looked a little off, you know? Yep. Props to the movie. Good job.
Mm-hmm. Let's see what else I want to say. So since we're talking about like how much our opinions will be based on how the landing sticks, what do you think they might do in the next one?
See, that's part of where I'm curious how they'll handle it, because they very much established between this movie and 2018 that Michael doesn't care about Laurie Strode's character. So that kind of driving force of them going at each other, I don't know if it's going to have as big of an impact, but I think just her mission to go after him, like, especially after how this one ends, there's more juice for it.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of what they'll do with the plot and everything, with it being 4 years later, I don't know how they're going to take the approach of it, you know?
Like the thing I was curious about is like, what is the point of them just bringing up Michael staring out his sister's window? Like, what is that gonna lead up to?
I don't know. I do not know.
Mm-hmm. And I will, and one thing these two movies both do an excellent job at is that even the most incidental one or two scene victim characters, they give them a little more characterization than these movies usually do. Like in the 2018 film, the kid who was driving like with his dad when they saw the bus, or the cops talking about food outside Laurie's house, or here like the gay couple that lives in the Myers house, who one of them was one of the Mad TV cast member, so I recognized him from that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And what else?
I mean, that's kind of... This also gives you an idea of how you're going to feel on the movie. Outside of us mentioning, well, how did you think of this particular kill, which with this being a audio only podcast format that doesn't really work for discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's only so much you can really discuss on this particular one, especially with not knowing how things are going to be paid off in the end. Mm-hmm. So, like I said before, if you're a fan of slashers, you'll probably enjoy it. It's far from the worst Halloween, but it's also not near the best either.
Mm-hmm. And just as a side note, I will, like, in terms of what the good and bad installments of the franchise are, I will always defend Halloween 5. That's like the most underrated one, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like Halloween 5 is almost kind of the forgotten one, mm-hmm. along with 4, just because honestly that entire Thorn timeline, Thorn, sorry. It's been a while since I've seen those movies, but mm-hmm. the whole Thorn timeline, like, it ended so bad that people kind of forget, hey, stuff like the Jamie character were actually pretty good at the start, you know?
I mean, I will say, as much as people were disappointed that John Carpenter's anthology plans never came through, I will say some of the Michael Myers sequels really did get experimental by slasher standards.
Yeah. Did that experiment always work? No. Were there some batshit crazy sequel ideas they ended up not going with that thank goodness they didn't? Yes, and there's videos on YouTube on that. I highly recommend checking those out because if you thought Jason in Space got weird, you have no idea what they almost did.
And I will say, with this being the middle chapter of a trilogy and probably having the darkest ending, I actually want Halloween Ends to have well, I guess happy is out of the question, but a bittersweet ending. Like, I want Laurie to emerge triumphant in the end.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a mistake to kill off her character since they've already done that in previous timelines, you know?
Well, I think maybe they could still like kill her off at like the very final battle, but I don't want Michael to win in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if End sticks the landing, it could be the first slasher franchise to have something that actually works as a final installment and it sticks.
I somewhat doubt that will happen just by nature of how these sequels work, but I hope you're right, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's just so weird that when you look at the history of the behind the scenes of the three major slasher icons, it is so weird that Halloween is the franchise where the studio managed to get its shit together and put something out.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought we'd go on this long without another Friday the 13th?
And I will say, like, I know we disagreed about this in the comments before, but I would have liked to see Paul Rudd come back for Tommy. Like, Anthony Michael Hall is pretty good, but it would have been great to see Rudd return.
See, as much as I love him as an actor, I think just with them trying to separate the timelines, that would just cause more confusion than anything. But I do love Paul Rudd as an actor. In fact, he's the only thing that's making me kind of want to watch the Ghostbusters reboot that I otherwise have no interest in, aside from, yeah, but Paul Rudd's usually pretty good.
Now, do you think, like, if it wasn't a timeline thing, and if he was just maybe an actor they were considering for the role, could you have seen him playing this version of Tommy?
I mean, I'm sure he would have done a good job with it, but just with the movies he takes nowadays, I don't know if he would have been interested in it. But he's a good actor. He could have pulled it off, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But unless Dave has anything else he wants to add, I think we'll wrap this one up for now.
I'm just trying to think. Give me a few seconds. I do think, like, however Michael is defeated, I think it'll be related to like having his mask taken off. Like, I read some popular fan theories that you have to destroy the idea of the boogeyman, so to speak.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
And also, I read that because they're doing a 4-year time jump for Ends, they said in some fashion the pandemic will be addressed in universe.
Wonder how they pulled that off.
I'm not gonna lie, for a brief moment, I was thinking when I first heard that, like, are they gonna kill Michael with the virus? Like,
Oh, that'd be the most anticlimactic ending ever if they did.
I mean, like, they could. I could see the internet memes now. Michael, he survived all these attacks. He thought his immune system would save him, but no.
But that being said, folks, just final thoughts. I think you kind of get the feeling for my feelings on the film of just this. I think it's a fun sequel, but not necessarily an amazing sequel. But I do think if you're interested in it, you'll have fun with it.
I mean, if you're somebody who's just big into slashers, you'll probably be more accepting of this. I still prefer 2018 more, but this is a worthy follow up. And I think if N sticks to landing, I might end up liking this more in hindsight.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. But that's all we have for now. Stay tuned. We're going to have a review of the Muppets Haunted Mansion coming up next week. So be sure to stick around, subscribe to the podcast if you wish to, and we'll see you next time. Dave, thank you as always for joining me on this podcast.
Farewell.